Since our last coverage of the Nolan Wells case, a lot has happened. When we last covered it, Nolan had disappeared after a 4th of July trip to Horn Island and was found 2 days later. And we don't mean a lot in the way that social media moves, where every repost and rumor feels like a development. We mean actual, confirmed, documented movement in the investigation into the death of 18-year-old Nolan Xavier Wells, a wide receiver at Southwest Mississippi Community College. Press conferences, an independent autopsy, a cell phone investigation, a grand jury announcement, a meeting with the district attorney, and through all of it, a family that is still waiting for an answer to the only question that actually matters. What happened to their son on Horn Island on the 4th of July? As of today, that question still does not have a public answer. But the shape of this investigation has changed considerably. So let's go through what has actually been confirmed, what has been clarified, and what is still wide open. The first thing that shifted was the story around the cell phone. You may remember that early reporting placed Nolan's phone on Horn Island with him. But that's not what investigators found when they dug into the timeline. According to Ben Crump, the civil rights attorney retained by the Wells family, the friends who left Horn Island without Nolan took his phone with them. That detail, on its own, troubled the family immediately. If Nolan had chosen to stay on the island voluntarily, as the friends initially claimed, why would he hand over his phone? Horn Island has no cell signal, no facilities, no way in or out, except by private boat. The phone would have been his only connection to anyone. But what came next made it worse. When Christine Wansley, Nolan's mother, used Life 360 and Snapchat to track her son's phone that night, the two apps showed different locations. Tashema Hands, the mother of Nolan's friend Javon Williams, helped Wansley track the phone down. Snapchat's location data led them to a house where, by Hands' account, a large number of people were gathered. When the family eventually recovered the device, they went through it, and messages had been deleted. Texts, Snapchat messages, gone. Crump went public with this on national television. The guys on the boat said Nolan stayed, but they took his cell phone, he said. That's not adding up to them. The fact that when the family gets the cell phone back, they're trying to understand why there are deleted messages, and so it's very concerning to them. He announced that the family would be employing digital forensics experts to attempt to recover whatever data remained on the device. Now, and this is important, it has not been confirmed by law enforcement who deleted those messages, when they were deleted, or whether the deletion was intentional. It could be routine app behavior. It could be something else. But what was announced at the July 15th meeting with the district attorney is that there would be a parallel, independent cell phone investigation, one coordinated by Crump's team running alongside the official law enforcement examination of the same device. Two separate teams, looking at the same phone. When those findings eventually come out, any gap between them is going to be very significant. The second major development involves the conflicting witness accounts, and specifically, a contradiction that goes to the core of what happened in Nolan's final hours. The friends on the boat told investigators that Nolan chose to stay on Horn Island because he'd been spending time with a girl he'd met that day. That was the working explanation from the very beginning. But according to Crump, when investigators spoke to that young woman, she gave a completely different account. She said that after she and Nolan finished talking, he told her he was going back to the boat. Not staying, leaving, going back. Those two accounts cannot both be true. Either Nolan told his friends he was staying, or he told the girl he was leaving. Crump said it plainly at the July 10th press conference. She's saying he went and got on the boat. They're saying he didn't get on the boat. So which is it? Javon Williams, a close friend of Nolan's, who was on the island that day on a separate boat, has publicly pushed back on the idea that Nolan would have stayed behind at all. He told CNN, it isn't like Nolan to separate from the group he arrived with, saying he'd never known him to watch friends leave without him. Williams said the last time he saw Nolan that afternoon, Nolan told him he loved him. At the time of this recording, investigators have not publicly confirmed which account they find credible, or whether there is any additional evidence, phone data, photographic evidence, witness testimony from anyone else on the island, that resolves it. The third development is the viral video, and the clarification that came out of it. A cell phone clip began circulating on social media shortly after Nolan's death, with audio capturing what sounded like a heated confrontation. A voice was demanding a phone back, and many people online, and initially, according to Crump, multiple people who knew Nolan, believed it was Nolan's voice they were hearing. At the July 10th press conference, Crump said that the people who identified the voice believed Nolan could be heard demanding his phone returned. But his friend Tristan Shepard, who was also on the trip, went on Good Morning America and said the voice in that video was not Nolan's, it was his. Shepard said he had been involved in a separate altercation that day and needed to be restrained. Javon Williams also confirmed to CNN that he believed the voice belonged to Shepard, not Nolan. He said he was among those helping calm Shepard down in that video. That clarification matters for a specific reason. It does not eliminate the question of whether an argument occurred involving Nolan. It simply confirms that the person shouting in that particular video was not him. Separately, the sheriff's office has publicly requested all original, unedited footage and photos from the northwestern tip of Horn Island on July 4th, specifically any that show alleged altercations or images of Nolan Wells. The request suggests investigators are attempting to determine whether any altercations captured on video are relevant to Nolan's final hours. The fourth development is the Coast Guard timeline, which has received far less attention than it deserves. It has now been confirmed by the U.S. Coast Guard, reported by Locks in Biloxi, that one of Nolan's friends made a call to the Coast Guard at approximately 11 p.m. on the night of July 4th. The Coast Guard assessed that the situation did not require their assistance and did not respond. Christine Wansley confirmed that she received a call from one of Nolan's friends, a young man named Warren, at 11:07 p.m. that same night. She began trying to locate her son. She checked both tracking apps. She reached out to law enforcement. There was, by her account, confusion between different agencies about which had jurisdiction over Horn Island. It sits out in the Mississippi Sound, and the formal search for Nolan did not officially begin until around noon on July 5th. That is roughly 13 hours after the initial Coast Guard contact. That gap is something the family's legal team has not let go of, and it remains unexplained to their satisfaction. Now, on the investigation itself, what has law enforcement actually been doing? Sheriff John Ledbetter confirmed that by 2 weeks into the case, investigators had spoken to approximately 60 witnesses. The three friends who were specifically on the same boat as Nolan to Horn Island have each been interviewed in depth. The sheriff's office has been actively collecting tips and reviewing photo and video evidence submitted by the public. The FBI's Jackson Field Office issued a formal statement clarifying its role. It has been assisting the Jackson County Sheriff's Office with certain aspects of the investigation, in which federal tools and partnerships proved valuable. But the Sheriff's Office is leading and will continue to lead. One area where federal involvement has been confirmed is the examination of digital evidence. Another is the investigation into interstate death threats, threats that have been directed at some of the friends who were on the boat that day. That's the piece of this story that cuts in a different direction, and it can't be ignored. Some of Nolan's friends from that trip have been receiving death threats. Tristan Shepard said publicly, "We did no wrong here, and we don't understand how we're getting so much hate behind us. We all cared for and loved Nolan, and nobody wanted to see Nolan die." Ashley Cole, the mother of another friend who was on the trip, said her family has also been threatened. "We will do everything within our power to assist Nolan's family in their quest for answers," she wrote on Facebook, while also writing, "We realize that the truth will not stop the calls for the death of our small children." That tension is real. The grief is real on all sides. And the instinct to assign blame before the facts are known is an entirely human one, but it has already caused serious harm to people who may turn out to have had nothing to do with what happened to Nolan. That does not mean hard questions shouldn't be asked. It means they should be asked of the people investigating, not taken out on teenagers who are themselves grieving. That instinct to assign blame early has also taken on a racial dimension, and it's worth addressing directly. Photos from the trip show Nolan with friends who appear to be all white, and that image, combined with Mississippi's history, has led some online to speculate that race played a role in his death. CNN law enforcement analyst Charles Ramsey, who is black and a former police commissioner in Philadelphia and Washington, D.C., said that until the autopsy results are released, drawing conclusions either way would be a disservice to the family. Ramsey said the pace of this investigation is not unusual for a death under uncertain circumstances. What is unusual, he said, is the level of media attention, which he attributed directly to the case happening in Mississippi, to Nolan being black, and to his friends being white. There is also a more mundane, non-criminal explanation still on the table. Horn Island's currents are known locally as rough and unpredictable, and the Jackson County coroner has said his office regularly receives drowning victims recovered from Mississippi's barrier islands. That fact doesn't resolve any of the open questions about the phone, the timeline, or the conflicting accounts, but it is part of the full picture, and it's why investigators and the coroner have both been careful not to jump to conclusions before the toxicology results are in. On the autopsies, both remain pending. The Mississippi State Medical Examiner's Office conducted its autopsy on July 7th, the day after Nolan's body was found. It has been waiting on toxicology results, which routinely take several weeks. The family commissioned a separate independent autopsy performed by Dr. Roger Mitchell in Washington, D.C., a forensic pathologist with no connection to Mississippi law enforcement. That autopsy was funded by Colin Kaepernick. Results from Dr. Mitchell's examination were expected to be released around July 10th, but as of now, neither set of results has been made public. Jackson County Coroner Bruce Lind stated early in the investigation that there were no immediately visible signs of trauma or foul play, but he was equally clear that the full autopsy process, including toxicology, was necessary before any conclusion could be drawn. The single most consequential procedural development came on July 15th, following a meeting between Ben Crump, the Wells family, and Jackson County District Attorney Angel Myers McElrath. Crump announced that the investigation's findings would be presented to a grand jury once the investigation is complete. The DA had already said publicly that this is standard procedure for deaths that are not classified as natural deaths, and her office confirmed it was treating this case as a priority. But Crump's announcement carried a specific demand with it. The district attorney must put every relevant fact before the grand jury. Nothing held back. Nothing overlooked. A grand jury matters here, for one reason above all others. It has subpoena power. It can compel witnesses who may have chosen not to speak voluntarily to testify under oath. In a case where accounts are conflicting, where messages may have been deleted, and where the full truth of what happened on an island with no communications and no staff has yet to be established, that power to compel testimony could be decisive. The support that has rallied around the Wells family has also been notable. Tyler Perry, the filmmaker, covered Nolan's funeral expenses entirely. Colin Kaepernick funded the independent autopsy. The Reverend Al Sharpton has been present at press conferences and delivered the eulogy at today's funeral. The sheer scale of public and high-profile support reflects both the grief and the distrust that this case has activated. Supporters of the family argue that high-profile attention helps ensure cases like this continue to receive scrutiny, a case Ben Crump has made before, in other cases involving black families in the South. And so today, July 20th, 2026, Nolan Wells was laid to rest in Ocean Springs, Mississippi. Visitation at Center Point Church this morning, a funeral service, and then, because of who Nolan was, a celebration of life in the afternoon at the Jackson County Fairgrounds. Not a quiet wake, but a party. Because as Christine Wansley said, he would not want us to be sitting around crying and eating. He was 18 years old. He had just signed to play college football. He was about to go to camp that Monday. He spent his last free day on an island with friends, and he never made it home. The autopsies are pending. The cell phone investigation is underway. The grand jury process is coming. The witnesses have been interviewed, but not all of the accounts have been reconciled. The truth of what happened on Horn Island on the 4th of July has not yet been established. What we know for certain is that a family spent the last 16 days demanding to know how their son went to an island and never came back, and they still don't have that answer. When the investigation moves forward, when the results come in, when the grand jury convenes, we will be here.